This will be a response to the YouTube video, a critique of the Austrian School of Economics. And this video is just a reading off of an article from Huppy.com. And so I'll go ahead and debunk Huppy here. And this is pretty easy because the criticisms are fairly noobish, fairly, science, facts, yeah. And the first way to tell you're arguing with an idiot is if they really emphasize, having facts and statistics and hard numbers. And the reason being is that there's an infinity of facts. Let's say there was a fire at a building. Well, there was oxygen within the general vicinity of this building. The building was painted beige. There was a door in the front of the building that was one of those revolving doors. There were potted plants in the entryway, and there was a elevator. The outside was stucco. There was a little marble entryway. So when someone says they want the facts, what they really mean is that they want the relevant information. But what is the relevant information? That requires a theory. That requires a theory before gathering any sensory data. And of course we can go further and say that nobody knows what a true fact is because one cannot process the thing in itself. And even if one could directly calculate at the absolute smallest level of information, at the level what I call the true atom, not way smaller than quarks, even if they could direct process at that level, that would still be their interpretation of sense data that's just sent to the brain. One cannot grasp the thing in itself. It's all interpretation. But this is not necessary. Just pointing out the necessity of a theory is all that is needed. There's no true fact. Now, in this article, Huppy is using a faulty definition of a priori. I'm not going to bother to say how Huppy's using it. A priori means prior to experience. Like the statement that all bachelors are unmarried is a priori true based on the definition of bachelor, the definition of unmarried, and the definition of are/to/be/is. It is a priori true based on the component parts of that syllogism. One doesn't need to go out and test this to try to find married bachelors. If you are married, you are not a bachelor by some standard of marriage and the standard of bachelor. Similarly, the rules of geometry are true in the same way. For example, a triangle has 3 sides and the angles all have 180 degrees. Should we go out and draw thousands of two-dimensional triangles to test this hypothesis? Should we use the scientific method for geometry? It's ridiculous. But okay. A priori reasoning is good for abstract geometry, but that's not the same as economics. Although we can say that that while there are a few perfect two-dimensional triangles, this a priori geometric reasoning is still very useful. Let me take another example. Inflation and the money supply. Let's say you took a chart that had the prices of a basket of goods on one axis. We'll say gold, housing, cars, certain foodstuffs. Or we're just making stuff up. Let's just pretend you had perfect information of the prices of all things in the economy. Let's say you didn't have to use a basket, a representative basket. You could just say, they'll just stipulate we know that. So you have the price of everything on one axis and the money supply on another. And let's say you ran a correlation between expansion of the money supply and the price of goods and services. If you did this, you would find that the results of expanding the money supply are weak and mixed, or that is typically what is found when this is done. Why is this? Well, because there are other factors at play, such as production processes getting more efficient, individuals demanding less and hoarding a bunch of money, investment in new capital equipment, and new capital equipment that eventually drives the prices of stuff down further because they're producing so much more stuff. So if you produce more stuff and the money supply remains constant, the price of stuff will go down. So expanding the money supply just offsets this. Now there is a debate on, there's lots of debate on the scientific method, to be sure, and what really is science. But let's just pretend right now that it's settled, and that what you learn in high school is the scientific method, which goes hypothesis, experiment, analysis, conclusion, or something like that. Now, even this requires a theory about what data is important. And there are many examples of some researchers drawing very different conclusions from the same data. Right? Because the theory is important. All of them have very high IQs, are very highly credentials, yet they draw different conclusions because they have different interpretations and different, and so have a different analysis. That is, and even if they run the same experiment, they may choose to measure different things in the same experiment based on a theory of what facts are relevant. And so if they have a different theory about what facts are relevant, they'll choose to measure different things within the same experiment. So let's say you have a hypothesis that expanding the money supply causes inflation. How would you test this? Well, what you could do is you could look at periods where central banks lowered interest rates and thus expanding the money supply, and see if it results in price inflation and how much. If you do this, the results are typically weak and mixed. That is, the overall correlation is low, and there are even some instances in which expanding the money supply occurred when prices fell. Now, an a priori analysis would say, money is used as a medium of exchange. All money is spent or used somehow. All else being equal, an expansion of the money supply will result in a rise in nominal prices. In this instance, the scientific method fails and a priorism succeeds. But why economics? Why do Austrians reserve a priori reasoning for economics and not, say, animal biology? Well, the reason is that in an economy, things cannot be held equal in the same way they can in laboratory experiments. And even in laboratory experiments, there are lots of confounders, and experiments routinely get thrown out because of them. And the data gathered in experiments depends on theories and what to measure. In economics, the scientific method is much, much weaker than even that. Now, I'm going to preemptively respond to a person saying, well, that may have been true a while ago, but now we have supercomputers, and supercomputers are magic. And what we can do is we can plug in, in a whole bunch of individual actors and see how they behave, right, in given circumstances. But that all depends on a theory of the individual actors. I don't want to go into that. But all that said, nobody has been able to predict business cycles like the Austrians. So even if you're a gung-ho empiricist, Austrians win on that count too.